Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Med Herosner live on Clubhouse. This is episode 10. I'm your host, Vic and I'm joined by my co-host, Mike Balyan, and with a special moderator, Dian Yanikian. I want to thank both of our guests for allowing us to be part of this conversation and host the show. Joining us, our guest speakers, Dr. Vahan Setyan and Yeghishe Kazarian. This is a special topic in which all Armenians around the world have different opinions. One of the main reasons for this conversation is to hear both sides of the spectrum and to come together as Armenians and embrace our history, both pre and post Christianity. Our main topic is, did Christianity destroy Armenian culture? We have a lot to cover, and not to waste any time, I'm going to pass the baton to Diran Yanikian, who will moderate the show. Diran, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vic. I'd like to make a brief introduction of our guest. Dr. Setyan is no stranger to the interview chair. He has been on numerous TV talk shows and podcasts, both for Armenian and English-speaking audiences, as well as written several books on Armenian history. One of the subjects Vahan has written about is that the deep-rooted history of the Armenian people has been lost or erased over the past few centuries. We have an intriguing discussion of his research, the cradle of civilization in the vast area of what used to be the Armenian highlands. His books are available at Aubrey's Bookstore and Amazon. We also have Yeghishe. Yeghishe is the one-man army behind the website People of R. His website is dedicated to the rediscovery, education, and preservation of Armenian history and its culture. He has been writing about Armenian history and making educational YouTube videos for over 10 years. He describes himself as an eternal student of history, always on the lookout for cultural treasures, but with utmost regard for academic integrity. He prides himself with being able to combine his passion for art with his passion for history in his work. He has collaborated with several universities, and his work has been featured on many Armenian websites, including prominent news outlets. Today's talk will consist of two 40-minute segments. The first 40 minutes will be Vahan and Yeghishe discussing the topic. The second 40 minutes, I'll open the stage to the audience to ask questions. Just to reiterate the topic, did Christianity destroy Armenian culture? Now, I'd like to give the stage to Yeghishe to start his introduction. I'd like to give 10 minutes to Yeghishe and then 10 minutes to Vahan. Yeghishe, take it away.
Okay, guys. Thank you, Diran. Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming here. For me, it's the first time speaking with an audience on a podcast, so I have to get used to it a little bit. Also, forgive my English. I live in Holland. And this is also the first time actually that I've revealed my identity to a wider audience as a creator of People of Art. Some of you might know my work. As Diran said, it has become a hobby of mine, history. And I've been talking to Vahan for a while now, and we had a lot of agreements on some interesting topics, and we had some good conversations, but this was one of the topics that we kind of we didn't agree on, and we never had a good conversation on it. So it seemed logical for us to have a conversation, either public or private, and especially not on Facebook, but via voice chat. So I'm really interested to hear Vahan's perspective. As for my perspective on Christianity, I would say this is a multi-layered actually topic, to be honest with you guys. And why I'm saying this is because I'm not actually, and maybe Vahan doesn't really know my position on this one, but we have to discover it. But I'm not a Christian maximalist, actually. So I will not say that our history or culture started with Christianity. I'm also not going to say that, I'm also not a minimalist. I'm not going to say that our history and culture ended with Christianity. And I'm really curious to hear Vahan's perspective on this, like I said, but My perspective is that absolutely not. Christianity did not destroy Armenian culture. I would actually say it's an evolution of Armenian culture. I would say it's a renaissance of Armenian culture, a long overdue renaissance after the collapse of Urartian Empire. I believe we had a lot of cultural decline. And I believe that the introduction of Christianity to Armenia had a twofold effect. One was, of course, political. Such things never happen without politics. Armenia has always been on the crossroads of empires. And a little side note to today's situation, there are actually empires right now that are trying to build roads through Armenia, one east to west and the other south north, and it's literally making a cross. Armenia even today is a crossroads of empires. So there was a political motivation behind it, and the political motivation mostly had to do with the preventing assimilation into the Sassanid Persian Empire. Because the Sassanid, the Parthians, in my opinion, at least from the history that I have been reading, the Parthians have been kind of okay with us for a long while, but when the Sassanids came, they became very zealous in their religion, their Zoroastrianism. So that was one political thing. But the cultural renaissance, there was also like the other effect, the cultural effect, right? It was tremendous. The things that the Christians produced, like the long-lasting literary tradition, building of universities. He ushered in a new golden age of architecture. They created national liturgy. Khachkar art was booming. We've been converting our neighbors. We've been converting Europe. There were Armenians prophesizing I can't pronounce that word, but they were preaching in Europe even prior to Armenian conversion. I live in Holland, like you guys know, and here the first man to convert the Dutch and the flaming the Belgian people was an Armenian, Saint Servatius. There were Armenians like Saint Miniato in Italy. That was living in 2500 AD or something in that direction, and the guy was long before Armenia became Christian. He was a saint. They performed miracles. So there was a huge boom in Edessa, which was Urfa, and Armenia when it comes to Christian church creation. And I'm not talking about the architecture, but Christianity as itself as a religion was not formed yet. It was not formed as an organized religion. So it got formed actually in Edessa and Armenia. Those were some of the centers of creation of this religion. And after that, Armenians went to Europe. They went to our neighbors. We even tried at some point to convert the Mongols. We have our own quarter in Jerusalem as a small, one could say, insignificant nation. So, yeah, to make the long story short, no, I do not believe that Christianity destroyed Armenian culture. I do believe, Vahan, that the transition did not go as smoothly as one would hope. There were some problems, I do agree, and you're probably going to mention them. That's good. But the Christianity did not make us less Armenian. It did not force us to assimilate into any other ethnic religious group. In fact, it separated us from other religious groups and other ethnic groups. If the aim of Christianity was to destroy our culture, to make us disappear as a people, we wouldn't have existed today. So, yeah, there's a lot to thank for Christianity, and there's a lot of innovation. And I hope that we can be proud of that too, of that history, that part of our history too. I hope we don't dismiss pre-Christian history, because I really love that part too, and also the post or Christian era, or not post, but the Christian era, right? So so that would be my position. I think that Christianity created a new renaissance for our people that was long overdue, and because of that, they have extended the lifespan of the Armenian nation, something many other empires and people like the Hittites and the Babylonians and many others did not survive, because they didn't have such a renaissance, in my opinion. Was it 10 minutes, guys?
Well, you got an extra minute, so you can hand it over to
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. No, Vahan, go ahead. Otherwise, I have to do the Mongolian throat singing again.
Sounds good. Well, Yeghishe, appreciate the opportunity for me to be on this podcast discussion, and hearing you and seeing you in action for many years actually is very inspiring, because not only you have good content, but the way you also describe and formulate that for the wider audience is pretty good. So obviously we have chatted for many years, starting from Facebook and beyond, but and this conversation is really something that would apply to not only Armenians but to other cultures as well, so they can reflect how Christianity transformed their cultures and their heritage. And when I hear you speak, the thing is, I can't help myself but to agree on many of the things that you say, and that has been the misconception in the public, that somehow I disregard the value or whatever that would be defined as to that was brought to the Armenian highlands. It's not really a clear-cut answer as far as whether it really destroyed or not, but looking at the Armenian history itself, and I'm glad that you know this too, because you've been covering ancient history of Armenian people for many years, and you know how far back we go, and what our ancestors have done throughout the millennia, and when we take that into perspective, we kind of start somewhat questioning the information that we have now. Obviously, there's a lot of he said, she said when it comes to history, because obviously we were not there, so we have to resort to whatever we have available. And with the transformation of the Armenian kingdom and its destruction, and then the eventual resurrection of follow-up kingdoms, as far as we can see, the idea of the transition from pre-Christian to Christian not being as smooth as intended, as you quoted. Actually, the situation is much worse, and the reason why I'm saying that is not for me to be against any kind of a theological perspective, and I hope that the audience realizes that this debate has nothing to do with theology, but the history of things and history of the religion itself and its impact on the Armenian culture and history. So once we put theology away, we start resorting to all the material that we have come across, and the material is no secret. I mean, we can do our own research and find the same sources, and sometimes history is a interpretation task. Nothing is really concrete. We have to take everything with a grain of salt, and whatever historians have written about that transition. And if we look at ancient history, and then let's go to the 4th century, around 301. The idea of that our history was a transition period from one to the other. It's a little bit sugarcoating a bigger problem, because what's happening right now is because of that transition, many of the things were destroyed, and we're trying to find our heritage and history in other sources, in other people's history, because we don't have pretty much nothing between, let's say, from that time all the way to the 10th century. Yes, we have a lot of manuscripts. We have a lot of beautiful liturgy that has been subscribed and transcribed in ancient books, and throughout world history, the Armenian language and its culture has been revered pretty much to the fullest extent. But at the same time, if we had a not so good transition, we would see a continuum of a culture from one to the other, and we really don't see that. We have no literature that have survived from that period all the way until 9th or 10th century. Many of the literature is copies of copies of copies, and what we come down to is what our historians have written during that time. Yes, we do have Greek and Roman historians actually who have emphasized the sheer destruction of Armenian culture when Christianity came through. We can go from the Tertullian all the way to Horenazzi and beyond, and obviously whatever we are reading right now on that time period, has been endorsed and written and supported and funded by the clergy. So sometimes I would say maybe Horenazzi is one of the guys that really tried to tell us what really happened there, but because it was supported by the clergy and the Armenian Church of his publication, he had to be careful on what he says, what he needs to say to the public. Now we obviously have Messer of Mashtots, for example, who came to the scenes, and obviously he was born around 362. So the Armenian conversion, and I want to use the word conversion, very loosely because that's also sugarcoating it. But when we have Mashtots and him not having anything survivable, at least until Gordion came after his death, and who wrote about his life, and any other who was writing about that period, you can see that there is a lot of promotion of the goodness of Christianity that came through, how they were so proud to destroy Armenians who were against Christianity, and we see that from with the works of even Mashtots and everybody else. Agatangelos says the same thing, and I wouldn't blame them for them to be at that position, because they were for Christianity. Obviously, they need to write the good things of why it was even justifiable for our Mithraic priest and pre-Christian clergy for them to die that way, because they were considered to be demons and heathens. And why not destroy them? Why not destroy the Anahi temple? Why not destroy all the temples that we had that used to house literature? And I think that the Christianity is very strictly, primarily tied to the Armenian alphabet and its literature and how it was restored by Messer of Mashtots. But as far as for the transition itself, obviously the Armenians saw the most destructive of all versions when there's a conversion from one religion to the other. Many other cultures, let's say Greek and Roman, they still do have their Christian past intact in a certain extent, because we have coins and we have other literature that have survived. But in the Armenian case, it was virtual, because we obviously have no literature, before the advent of Christianity, they came to the lands. And even the 301 conversion is debatable. Many people say that it's 314 versus 301. But at the same time, again, there's a lot of he says and she says in literature when it comes to us examining ancient history, but the absence of our pre-Christian past is already a indirect testament to the horrors that took place there. For us now to be able to try to find something that we can show the world that we had a continuum of a culture, and I think that the content of your website actually is a testament to that you also yourself are trying to find the past of our people cultures and language of many others across the world. We go to India, we go to Egypt, we go to Basque, we go to, the Sumerian lands and so forth. We're trying to find an echo of our culture and heritage amongst them, because otherwise our own cultural relics have been pretty much destroyed. And it's not debatable whether, we have things or not. We just don't. And we have to accept that. Now, the problem lies is that once we start debating on this issue, the emotional approach comes through, and people start defending, the conversion of Christianity from theological standpoint mainly, and to a point where sometimes they send you to hell for saying things that are opposite. So, it is a sensitive topic, but I think that if we can just hinge on the evidence and the absence of evidence between pre-Christian and post-Christian era, I think that we can come to a common ground and agree that the transition was much worse than being smooth, and how that transition kind of destroyed everything that we had, and we can see that we can hardly find a pillar of our thousands of temples that we had, and the destruction was similar to many other cultures. It was not just Armenia itself. That's why we hardly find anything, and even all our most ancient churches have been built on our temples, and I'm sure we can agree on that too. But at the same time, the idea of how does a culture that has had a certain form of religion or faith or a worldview for thousands of years would somehow transition into something foreign, regardless of whether we want to emphasize the point that Christianity, the cradle or even the crucible of Christianity was in Edessa, and then King Akbar was part of it. Well, many historians say King Akbar was an Arab himself, but that's secondary. What I mean is that the full force of the conversion, took place within the 4th century, and that conversion kind of was a total destruction. And I want to call it destruction because it really destroyed many of the things that we're trying to find now. And then I think that also leads to our problem where we debate whether Messer of Mashtutz invented the alphabet or he rediscovered the alphabet. And I think that both of us are trying to fix that too in the media. So that way people don't think that Armenians didn't have any literature before Messer of Mashtutz. The idea of Messer of Mashtutz, being the inventor and that Armenians didn't have literature before him is actually the result of the Christian support of the conversion of Armenia into Christianity. That's why we say that, because we have a very difficult time proving that we had literature of in Armenian language before Messer of Mashtutz, and that is part of the repercussions of this transition. So again, I want to close this 10 minutes by saying that I agree most of the things that you say, but I think that we need to be careful and not sugarcoating the problem, which is bigger than people think.
Thank you, Vahan. Yeghishe, I'd like to give you the chance to rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you. I think it would be good if we just from this moment just talk, right? So you said a few things, Vahan, and yeah, man, I do also have like an issue with the fact that that there was a lot of destruction going on. My problem, however, with that argument is that we first have to define, right, what is the Armenian culture. If we're going to say and jump in also, Vahan, in this conversation too, like if you're going,
go ahead, I'm listening.
Yeah, so if you're going to say like did Christianity destroy Armenian culture? We have to define it. You say we have trouble finding ancient Armenian history. I don't think we have that much trouble. There's a lot of things found in the ground. There's tons of relics from the Araratian era, and there is a lot of found from different eras as well. From Vishapkars, right? From the Kura Araxis culture, there's pottery, there's ton of it. The problem is, none of it is very, homogeneous, because cultures tend to shift. They tend to change with innovation. They are dynamic. They're not static, and the cultural borders are not the same as ethnic borders. So when you say they destroyed the temple of Anahit, are we sure Anahit was Armenian? Like it was an Armenian invention? Because where was Anahit during Ararat time? Vahan, we had Haldi. Where was Haldi during Tigran the Great? Why did Tigran use Greek letters? Why are there coins from the Artashat or Artashes, right, in Armenian dynasty, that literally say, "I'm a Philhellenist. I'm a lover of Greek culture." So wouldn't you say that there's also a possibility that actually Urartu, that was one of those golden ages of Armenian cultural innovation, and then we had a steady decline of Armenian culture, much more of a shift towards a Persianization, and that ended with Christianity. So don't you think that we had several such periods of cultural change, while at the same time the ethnos, the Armenians, stayed the same? Right, so we know that the Urartians were literally Armenians because that's how the contemporary people called them. There is a trilingual Beistun inscription that translates literally Urartu into Armenia. So I would say, don't you think that that's also a possibility, that's exactly what happened at the time? It was a cultural shift. Something got destroyed. I have a picture I can show you guys here of that's something interesting that would actually illustrate this. There is a Vishapkar, a dragon stone from the Armenian era, from the maybe 7000 BC, something like that, and it was carved over by the Urartians with cuneiform inscription. They kind of destroyed that stone, and over that description later the Christians carved a cross over it. So it kind of illustrates what had happened to that region. Vahan, what would you consider like the real pre-Christian Armenian culture? Do you think that we had a continuous Armenian culture before Christianity? I'm very curious about that.
Well, yes, appreciate the commentary. Actually, for the record, your English is perfect, so never mind the accent. I got an accent too. So.
I have a problem finding the right words.
Oh, good, man. We get it. We get it.
You guys are doing great. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's great, and we understand it. Both intrinsically and physically as well. And I do agree with you as far as the availability of relics, and even thousands of relics, across, let's say, 12,000 years. It's not debatable whether we see a continuum of culture, let's say, from all the way to Portasar, to the Mitanni kingdom, to the Arada kingdom, to the Sumerian era, to Araratian kingdom and beyond. There is no doubt. However, if you take the thousands upon thousands of years of culture, you would expect if this was an actual allowable transition, let's say from pre-Christian to Christianity, you would actually see that the same people were able to embrace what they had and transition into the new. But we don't see that. Actually, we see all these things on the contrary. And I have seen that the Vishapkar and the crossing over of the cuneiforms and the cross. Yes, it is a very interesting testament to the transition of one to the other, and that inscription of the cross on that stela is actually a practice of the early Christians, so that how they would take over or destroy things by putting a cross over that, destroying the noses of things, of sculptures and so forth. So that is a testament to that, and I want to give a couple of quotes, from many historians, both Armenian and non-Armenian, on this transition. And again, I know that, we have a different perspective of things, of the same person that would say something and then they would correct themselves and say something else. But just the idea of their quote, gives you the perspective of what really happened. Now, this one quote, I'm sure that you have seen this, and you have also submitted your comments on this before. But I want to just read this quote and a couple of others, if I have the time, for you to see at least their perspective, right? That's why I say he say, she say, because we have these people across the the generations who have examined this themselves. Now, this is from Parisaruni, and we know him very well. He was an astronomer, an incredible person, an incredible Armenian, and he passed away. Now, he passed away in 2008, and this is a quote from his book. And he said that after adopting Christianity as state religion in Armenia, the big disaster took place. Okay. All heathen temples except Garni and statues were destroyed. All books were burned and abolished. The Armenian alphabet was disallowed as a heathen one. These were and are the dreadful shocks to the Armenian old history, science, and culture. He says the Armenian alphabet was disallowed, which means that we had Armenian alphabet before Messer Mashtos. And also, he was a very devoted Armenian to the Armenian culture and language and heritage. So he was very objective on providing perspective to the Armenian history, but he couldn't help it but to say this because he had seen the absence of culture. And here's another one from Robert McNamara, who is a historian, who was also a priest, by the way. He said that the Gregory the Illuminator destroyed the Armenian temples at Artashat with zeal and inherited the properties where Vahan and Anahit were worshipped. Here's another quote from Professor Peter Brown at University of St. Andrews. He said the conversion of Armenians into Christianity was through violence and threats. Here's a quote from the Religious Tract Society in London of 1917, where they say, both Agatangelos and Zenobius, a Syrian bishop, spoke of Gregory the Parthian's eventual destruction of the Armenian pre-Christian culture and Armenian Mithraic priesthood resistance and revolt against his conversion. Here's one. I'll end it here, but obviously, we don't have too much time. But I'm just trying to give these quotes before I really answer your question. This is from August Carrier, and we know him from 1899. And this is a longer quote, but I'm just going to just say it slowly. Their gods commanded that the ancient national gods, who are not gods, in quote, should be removed from the soil of Armenia, and that even their memory should be effaced. Turdat was accompanied by his nobles and soldiers. They were needed to fight against armed demons who frequently defended access to the pagan temples. He's talking about, our pre-Christian priests. He also took along Gregory, and leaving his residence at Baghrashapat, headed first to Artashat to destroy the altars of the goddess Anahit. However, before entering that city, he found on the road the sanctuary of the god Dij, which he destroyed before destroying that of Anahit. God Dij, obviously was our god of literature and sciences and many other things. Now, God Dij, obviously before Messer Mashtot, he was our god of literature. In other words, you cannot have a national god if you don't have your own national literature. That's why I emphasize literature very much, because, me and you, I think we can agree on this. We can agree that ancient Armenians were excelling in many areas of science, including mathematics, including chemistry, and architecture, and so forth, right? And you need a very structured system for you to be able to communicate all this information from one generation to the other. And also, if it is strictly the Armenian culture that is that advanced, for the lack of a better word, they need to have had this form of literature and cohesion for them to be able to transform their ideas from one generation to the other. And we can see that because some of the findings in Portasar can actually be found, at least the design and the replica of things and the way things are carved in preceding cultures. In other words, Portasar was discovered in 1993, and of course before 1970s. But the thing is, we have found relics that before its discovery to show that the Armenian culture had a continuum from Portasar to kind of reflect into their culture at that time. However, considering the sheer amount of time and stationary culture, in other words, the Armenians have been inhabiting that place for thousands of years. Obviously, they're not newcomers there, which means that they should have had more of this stuff available. Now, and Armenia was not the only place that this type of a destruction took. I mean, we had the early Christian priests who actually would go all the way to Egypt to destroy some of the carvings in Egypt to hide the fact that Christianity had its roots, from elsewhere, and that was the same thing with Armenia, because for you to have a full presence of a new religion, and for you to actually, whether it's political or not, it's debatable. But let's say if it was a political move for Christianity to take root nationally as a national religion in Rio.
Vahan,
yeah.
Sorry to interject, but if you could get to your last point, I'd like to move on to closing statements, 5 minutes each.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So that would actually show that we are dealing with a transition, a political transition, whether it was useful or not. Maybe that is a better way of putting this. Was Christianity useful for the Armenians, for them to have a definite distinction from the others? And I think that idea alone, that Christianity kind of helped Armenians to stay the way they are, is kind of a debatable, because Armenians have had the presence of their ethnicity and who they were for thousands of years, regardless of what religion or regardless of what war came through. And I think that us seeing the Christian transition as being all positive, without mourning the lives of millions of people lost, without kind of realizing that we really did have destruction, and it's something for us to even, stop and think about. And without doing that, I think that it's a disservice and also a lack of respect to those who have perished during that transition. And I think that, we are doing very little to commemorate the lives of our pre-Christian past and those who have been destroyed by that transition. And ironically, that our Armenians being people of the God that they worship, had to endure this kind of a destruction, all the way until today, for them to see the continuous destruction taking place. So.
Yeah, thanks, Vahan. To be honest, I absolutely have to disagree with millions of people lost. There is no evidence of millions of people lost. That said, you quoted Heruni. Let's also make sure that we understand he was an interesting character, but he wasn't a historian here, right? He was a physicist and an engineer. And he also made other quotes, and I will read one very quickly. This is what he said: Christianity is the great religion of civilized nations, and Armenians have never been against Christianity, which was a continuation of their kind are God, the Sun religion indeed. There are other quotes, you guys can find them too. So, yeah, man. My point was, and I haven't heard it to be honest with you, Vahan, is that you're saying there is an undoubted continuation of culture. I don't think so. There is no, there is a big shift during the Urartian era and after, because I have been collecting. I've been collecting all the deities mentioned in the Urartian text, and I have actually a spreadsheet made with over 80 deities. It's very interesting, and they describe to detail their religious practices, and they're absolutely not the same as Anahit, Aramast, Tyr, and some of the other later Zoroastrianized, Persianized deities. So how do we explain that? How do we explain that transition? So there have been different eras in our history. Although ethnically we have remained Armenian, we have had different eras of transition. There's clear evidence for that. There's different cultures. Kura-Araxes culture, like I said, you have seen yourself. Like, I'm not going to repeat it. Where the dragon stones are carved over, right? But Christianity was not just a transition; it was needed. It was absolutely needed. One good example is my people. I'm Hamshensi from Abkhazia. Some people know me. Half of my people are Muslims. Half of my people are Christian. And those who are Christians retained their Armenian heritage. Those who became Muslim or changed, they have a hard time figuring out their identity. So in my view, Christianity was not just there's a destruction, the millions of people died, which that really has to be proven first. That it's more than that it was politically needed and culturally needed. We revived a lot of Armenian universities, literature. There was a huge explosion of art, of Armenian national art, and today we still exist as a nation. We are Armenians, so we also have to pay them respect. We, in my opinion, it's very important for us to be proud of our pre-Christian history, to dig into those cultures. What did they do? How did they live? Well, that's very interesting stuff, but we also need to recognize the Armenian Christian era. Because, Vahan, I understand your point. I understand it because you fall a little bit out of the mainstream historical narrative, which is, in my opinion, not giving enough credit to the pre-Christian era. I actually agree with that, with you. But the opposite should also not be done, right? We shouldn't be also dismissing almost 2,000 years of Christian innovations and history. So yeah.
Okay. I think I have 5 minutes. Yes. Yeghishe John. Not only do I agree, but also I obviously initially in this conversation I did emphasize the beauty and the value of post-Christian literature and liturgy and so forth. Even when in 1800s the translation of the Christian Bible was considered to be the queen of translations. That is all good, and the value needs to be put on the culture, and also the liturgy and literature that was developed, in this type of a golden era, after the alphabet was reconstructed. That is all good. Obviously, we do have the church, the Armenian church, who has been protecting many of our ancient culture. That also needs to be given as credit. Nobody's saying, let's destroy again. Obviously, the Armenian church, however, or in extent of their faults or not, they still were able to retain, the Armenian identity and culture. My emphasis is that when we, even Heroni's quote that you read, you actually can realize the irreconcilable perspective of my quote versus yours, even though it's the same person. Yeah. And one, right? So it's kind of dumbfounding to even have those two quotes to be written in the same book. And in my opinion, he was trying to, not to be too harsh and to make friends as he wrote that. As we also
he has other quotes too, in that direction.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know. What I'm saying is it's irreconcilable with the quote that I read, which can also be found. Sure. So my thing is that everybody, each and one of us, is trying to find some positive and good value in every area that we find. Whether we call Anahit Armenian or not. Even though the word Anahit can only be found in Armenian language etymology, whether Mithra or Armenian or not, we can find the etymology in Armenian only. The point is that you initially said, you see a lot of transition, continuity, and then you don't see it, and then you come back saying that you see it. My point is that, of course, throughout every transition, we are going to have pockets of absence and destruction, while at the same time, even out of the ashes, a phoenix rises and gives a new life to the next generation. So yes, it is a balance between good and bad, things that actually we would wish we had more information on. And of course, but we also need to give thanks, to the post-Christian era for retaining many of the pre-Christian prayers and gods and goddesses and so forth. It's just that, we have a lot of downplay of the pre-Christian Armenian culture because of the Christian tangents, because they want to consider it as demons, whatever it is called. And that is the part I think we need to fix. If we can just embrace all as something being part of the culture, without having any animosity beyond of what is normal, I think that we can be much more productive in presenting all this information and to the others. And I think that my final point would be that the Armenian literature, pre-Christian or post-Christian, that transition right there is as equally important as the transition from pre-Christian Armenia to the post, because the presence and absence and all that emphasis based on our literature and our alphabet is key in seeing how this transition took place and whether we did have all this information that we think we had. So, appreciate the time.
Can I
Yes, Yeghishe. You have 2 minutes, and then I'm going to move on to the next segment, asking questions from the audience. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a bonus. There's something that Vahan might like, actually. I'm interested, Vahan, your reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm sitting down. Go ahead. I'm sitting down.
Yeah. Here's the thing. maybe you've thought about this. This is something like outside of mainstream history, but it's actually very interesting. So Abraham, right? The guy who founded the Abrahamic religions, at the root of all of them. That man actually came from Urfa.
Mm-hmm.
He was born in Urfa, and his real name was Avram or Auram. Might have been Aram even. And we know that that Urfa is ground zero, not just for Abrahamic religions,
mm-hmm.
but also Port Azar is there, right? The Göbekli Tepe is ground zero for all world religions settled or organized world religions after Neolithic Revolution. Urfa was a very important region, part, and anciently it was called Urhai by the Assyrians. And Ur means land, so it literally means land of high. So I thought you might find that interesting. So it was also the center of Christian innovations. It wasn't just ground zero for Christianity, but it was also ground zero for Abrahamic religions, and at the same time, ground zero for probably all post-Neolithic religions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, you do make an interesting point because I have contemplated on that as well. Obviously, when Port Azar was unearthed again, the world saw that as the center and the cradle of theology or astrotheology. It was a religious center and so forth. And obviously, with Urfa or Edessa, however we call it, has seen
Urhai
or Urfa or Edessa. We have many angles to discuss that, but when you have, that was my point, when you have a people or a nation who has lived there for thousands upon thousands of years, obviously it is the cradle of innovation, it is the cradle of thought, it is the cradle of everything when it comes to human civilization. So obviously that's going to be a template or a foundation for many other religions to spring from. And of course that, we have many Semitic people that crossed through there, and many learned many things. And even during the Babylonian captivity, we had, many Jews who learned a lot of Armenian stuff, knowledge that were able to kind of utilize within their Judaistic or, Abrahamic religions, and which Abrahamic religion also, even, sprang and then gave birth to Christianity and also gave birth to Islam. So, but we just need to be careful and not to kind of inherit or translate something that may not be ours into us being the originators. And at the same time, with with Urfa or Urhai being the center, obviously, we don't have any say into this now because it is part of Turkey, and because of our lack of absence during as the excavations continue, we don't have our people working with the Turkish government and the Germans and others who are there right now for us to even contribute to the body of knowledge that they so we're kind of at a precipice where all this knowledge that you even indicated as part of that being a center of many things.
Including like the recovery or reinvention of the Armenian alphabet, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Also done in Urfa, and they describe it as a miraculous thing there. But
that's my point. That's my point. Is that if we take a very rational and reasonable approach, and look at this segment of time, let's say in history, we're able to find answers without resorting to any kind of supernatural things. And I think when we do that, we can realize that even, let's say, the trip of Master of Mashdod and his disciples and so forth to Syria and speaking with Daniel and so forth, for us to resurrect the letters and literature and so forth, this is all part of the the echo we just hear. And I think that we really need to pay attention to, even the Christian perspective of things, because there is always an undercurrent. They're trying to tell us something about what really transpired there and what really went on. And also, I want to emphasize that, the trip to Syria, and all the attempts for us to unearth, ancient Armenian language, and literature and alphabets, as actually, that was part of the reason why Ethiopians have the alphabet that they do, because it was influenced by that Armenian language. If you look at it before, it was just like scribbles. Never mind, how it sounds, but the foundation. That's why when people say it's a coincidence that Armenian alphabet looks like the Ethiopian, well, it's kind of the opposite. There are no coincidences when it comes to that. There is only one template, and that template has been used throughout. And Ethiopia is one of them. That's the reason why Ethiopia is using Armenian liturgy as part of their core when they pray. There's a reason why they do that. Anyway, appreciate the time for me to stress this.
Gentlemen, thank you for the enlightening discussion. There's a few plugs I would like to make. If you like the discussion, click on the greenhouse above, Armenian Club, and join. Second, if you click on Vic's profile, this discussion is being recorded and will be on the Herosner podcast, so make sure you follow that. If you like Vahan's discussion, you could find his books at Oswald Bookstore and Amazon.com. If you like Yeghishe's discussion, you could follow him on peopleofr.com. He's also on Instagram and Facebook. For the next segment, I'd like to open up the discussion to questions from the audience. Before I do, there's a few rules I want to go over. Please stay on topic. No political discussions. No personal attacks. Let's keep it civil and respectful. Raise your hand. I'll bring you up one by one to the stage. If you have 1 minute to ask your question, I'll keep you up for a quick rebuttal. Then please move yourself down. If at any point I hear any arguments or people talking over each other, no offense, but I'll mute both of you and then unmute and speak one at a time. Having said that, I think we have our first question from Mike. Mike, go ahead.
Well, hi, gentlemen and ladies. Yeghishe, pleasure to meet you, I guess, through this means. And Vahan, hi again. It was a pleasure hearing both of you guys speak. I want to ask a pretty general question, and I know in the discussions I've had with people, interesting tabletop conversation. We know mainstream historical narrative speaks of Emperor Constantine being the reason why we as a nation accepted Christianity. I've always wondered, and so have many others that I've spoken to, were we coerced by the Roman Empire because of their own political gains, or let's say territorial gains, or were Armenians seeking protection from the Romans because of enemies from the south and the east? Maybe it was beneficial for both sides. If you could both elaborate on that.
Yeghishe, you want to take on this one first?
Yeah, sure, Vic. Very good question. We have to paint a little bit of a context here. The context is, after Urartu declined, Armenia was a client state of Persia, and then a few times it actually managed to make itself independent. During Tigran the Great, of course, it was the largest attempt and the most successful. But after Tigran, who was not very national, to be honest with you guys, he imported Greeks into his city, who later opened the gates and let the Romans in. One of the reasons why actually we lost Tigran at Kert. He was, but after that, he lost. He became a client state of Rome. So the Artashat period went on, and then we had the Arsacid period. And during the Arsacids, who were an offshoot of Persians, it was an interesting period because Rome was fighting the Persians over Armenia. It was a buffer zone. They were fighting all the time. And there were three things going on. Either Armenia became under the influence of Rome, or the kingdom of Armenia became under the influence of Persia, or Armenia was briefly independent, because sometimes Armenians rose up and actually fought both of them because they were oppressive. So Armenia was doing a lot of politics, left and right, and one of the things that was going on there is that the Arsacids actually became very, I would say, independent from the Persians at some point, because they were princes of the Persian Arsacids, right? After that, they got their kind of their own kingdom, the Armenian kingdom, and they didn't want to lose that. And in Persia, they had a overthrow. They had the Sassanids. They came in, and the funny thing happened. The father of Gregory the Illuminator was actually one of the was a prince, and he was an assassin. He assassinated the king of Armenia, the Parthian king, the Arsacid king, and his wife too. Armenians got pissed off, and they murdered all of his family except for Gregory the Illuminator. So the Gregory he escaped to Rome, and in Rome and Caesarea he learned Christianity. So when Gregory came back, Tiridates was the Parthian guy. He of course did not like the guy. So it seems to me, just to come back to your point, it seems to me that Gregory indeed was more aligned with the Rome, with the West. But Tiridates might have been aligned, or might have wanted to be aligned with the Persians, be it if only the Persians would be more lenient, but they weren't. They had the Sassanids coming to power, and the Sassanids tried to take control of Armenia. They wanted to return to their former glory of their Achaemenid empire, and they tried to take control of all of Armenia. So I think Tiridates agreed with Gregory and his Western leaning ideas that we should move more towards Rome, but at the same time we need something brilliant that would actually dislocate us both from the assassins, from the Persians and the Romans, and we created our own Christianity, and actually never we rejected the one that came from during the Council of Chalcedon. We rejected the Constantinople and Roman doctrine, so we held to our own. So we we did align with Rome, in my opinion. At that point, that was a political thing, but at the same time, we managed to retain our own Christology, and it was very unique. We have a very unique church architecture too, our own liturgy. There's a lot of interesting uniqueness to Armenia, which probably does date back to way back to pre-Christian times. For example, we have in our churches no icons, right? Or usually there's no icons allowed. It's very dark, and there is these lights and shadows that are playing. It's very beautiful. So I would say to come back to your answer, I do think it was a move towards Rome, but they needed to have something more there than just move towards Rome and get assimilated. So I guess that was the goal.
Thank you, Yeghishe. Vahan, do you want to respond as well, or shall we move on to the next question?
Well, I can add just a couple of things, and I agree with Yeghishe on that one. It was more of a political move, and it was a way for them to have some kind of further strength within the position of the crossroads. Armenia has been kind of the place of all crossroads between East and West, and they have been bombarded by many cultures and many civilizations, and it has been chipping away on their existence. It's been chipping away from their psyche, and their mental status, you might say, and they have been there for thousands of years. So obviously, throughout time, you tend to lose power, and you tend to lose your strength within that position because everybody's chipping away as parasites. And I think that was a strategic move on Turdot's part to collaborate with, let's say, Gregory, for them to change the status quo and finally go into the Christian position. So the conversion of the king himself, Turdot, was an act of really a state and establishment of an official, and then organized clergy was also an act of the state. So they're kind of created this pact, and of course with Gregory the Parthian, and being on top of all this, because that would connect everything back home. And I mean, Gregory was raised as a Christian in Caesarea and Cappadocia, which, Cappadocia word itself comes from the word kaput. So, in other words, there's always this connection to politics and to the state of affairs of governments. And I think that Turdot's move for him to connect himself to this power into the conversion was actually a decision to be made at that time. And fortunately and unfortunately, we see the repercussions now because of that decision to be made as a political move.
Thank you for that, Vahan. Next up, we have Arthur. Arthur, if you could unmute yourself and ask your question.
All right. I believe I'm unmuted. My question is directed to our dear Dr. Vahan Setyan. And it regards the characterization of Christianity as a foreign religion. And what Yeghishe laid out beautifully was this continuum of constant change, especially with regard to religion in the Armenian highland. Now, I have trouble understanding this concept, and maybe Vahan can help us out here, but we have this Christian tradition, which, if you go back to the conversion date, has a 1700-year history on the Armenian highland, never mind the contributions before that date. But what Christianity replaced was this Hellenized pantheon that had been prominent, say, from the beginnings of Hellenism, say 3rd century BC, for about a period of 600 years. Now, before that, we had the pantheon that existed in the Urartian times. And if we take the word of Artak Movsesyan, the great late historian, according to the inscriptions on the door of Muhej in Van, there are about 80 deities listed that belong to the Urartian pantheon. And a great many of them were not individual gods, but they were characterizations of the supreme god Khaldi. And Artak Movsesyan went on to make the claim that our more ancient religion did not resemble Greek polytheism, for example, but was perhaps closer to monotheism. So Christianity can be viewed as a reversion to a more ancient past where there was a supreme god. But I digress. What I don't understand is why consider Christianity something foreign, otar, which automatically has bad connotations, when the crowning achievement of this Hellenistic pantheon, say in Mount Nemrut, doesn't have a single Armenian letter inscribed. There is Greek there. When the kings of the Artaxiad dynasty minted their coinage using Greek, they called themselves Friends of the Romans or Friends of the Greeks, Phil Hellenes. But afterwards, we see a very staunch national church, and the various cults that were in Armenia at that time, the Hellenistic cults, even Hinduism, which was present, were completely uprooted, and we were left with a national church. So where do we get this idea of Christianity being something foreign, whereas something that had only been on the Armenian highlands for 600 years is quote-unquote the native Armenian religion? Thanks.
Well, thank you for the question. I was trying to figure out what the primary question was, but I was able to take some notes. And the question itself is multi-pronged. So I hope I have enough time to address it, hopefully satisfactorily for you at this time. Greek was a lingua franca, and so as well as Latin at the time. So that's the indication right there that the language itself had to be used. and also at the same time, the idea of Christianity not being foreign, and I'm not using the foreign as a negative term, and I'm using foreign as a distinction between what you can call your own and what it may be an influence of others. If you really know anything about Christianity itself, you can see that it has been influenced by Mithraism, and Mithraism was our religion for thousands of years, including at the Armenian kingdom of Mitanni. So, and of course, Mithraism was brought to the Roman Empire by the they say the pirates, from Cappadocia and all that. So the idea of the Christianity being foreign, what I'm emphasizing is its offshoot as being another form of Judaism. Now, whether we like it or not, whether we want it or not, Christianity, if we have the sources to go from, is based on the New Testament and the Old Testament. But many of the aspects within Christianity is also Mithraic as well, especially if you read John and the Revelations, they're all Mithraic works. So when I say, foreign, I mean that, the aura and the representation of Christianity within the Armenian culture and religion, it's in most part, it is foreign. Whether we use the Armenian language and its translated work for us to mean something else of Christianity, that's besides the point. Its emphasis is Semitic. Its emphasis is Jerusalem, and all that pertains to it does connect to Judaism, whether we like it or not. But at the same time, if we look at the pantheon of gods and goddesses and deities and so forth, we have to look at it within the context. And Yeghishe, is his right. We have to look at things within context. The pantheon that we see with Anahit and Aramazd and Mir and so forth, they are part of the Armenian pantheon of gods, because at that time even the king himself, was Armenian, and you can see in the relief that he's wearing an Armenian crown, which is very distinct, the same that the King Tirtat used, Tigran the Great used to wear. Our crown was very distinct. So from the crown itself, we can decide and we can deduce actually that the pantheon of gods that we see, whether we have Greek inscriptions or not, that's secondary. That the idea and the pantheon itself was Armenian, because you do have the Armenian king shaking hands with God Mithra at the time.
Thank you, Vahan. Yeghishe, do you want to respond as well, or shall we move on to the next question?
I might respond a little bit, very shortly. I understand what Vahan is saying, but it's in my opinion, I have I read history a little bit differently. So the thing is you bring up Mitanni, but Mitanni had also many deities, and it was quite different from later Mithraism that we know from the Zoroastrian era. The Persians also had that religion, so either they got it from us or we got it from them. But the fact remains, and we can't deny this, that the Urartian era did not have Mithra. So we literally have all of their deities and practices there. So I think that was. I think there were different eras. And Mitanni did have indeed some, that was very interesting, some Indo-Aryan deities that we later see from the Persians too. But they had three of them, Indra and Mithra and some more, but they also had a lot of them that weren't Indo-Aryan, right?
And I agree. I agree, Yeghishe. And just to add one more thing to what Yeghishe is saying, if you look at Kingdom of Mitanni, its capital was Vachagan, and then Vachagan is the only name that Armenians use for a male person. So that already is an indication that the kingdom of Mitanni, had an Armenian tangent. And
around Urfa, right? Also.
Yes, that is correct.
So we have something here.
Yes. So and also when we look at certain gods and goddesses across the era, you see that many cultures take one word and then they use the inverse of that. For example, the Egyptian god Ra is the Armenian god Ar. If you read it backwards, the Greek and Roman goddess Diana, if you read it backwards, is Anahit. And many others.
There is a theory behind that. You know?
We have always have the inverse. The Deus inversus has been an idea for a long time, where they inverse a lot of things. Both at the God level and also in the reverse. And even the word Indra. If you read it backwards, it's Ardeni. And Ardeni is the place of King Haldi, right? God Haldi, and that's another stark reminder that whether we can call it Indra, in reverse is Ardeni, and Haldi was the god of victory, and Haldi in Armenian can be translated into Haldi. So we have a lot of these.
Vahan, one second.
Yeah.
1 second. I had the same theory about Haldi.
Yeah,
It's funny.
I know, right? Yeah, it's interesting. But yes, I don't want to talk too much. I just want to point that out. That's it.
Thank you, guys. I'd like to move on to the next question. Harar, you have the stage.
Thanks, you guys. I'll make it short. If we are looking to explore vis-a-vis Christianity, would it be possible to do a comparative analysis with other Europeans? After all, would Europe be Europe today with the spread of Christianity?
Harar, you're breaking up. I don't know if it's just for me, but...
It's
Sorry
for me
about
as well.
that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
Okay. So, would the barbarians of Germany be the culture today, or the barbarians in England, or the Vikings in Sweden? It's so embedded in Greek and Italian culture. Should the focus be on evolution of culture rather than... I say this because I'm trying to understand the point of sensationalism with the titling of this room connoting something negative with Christianity.
Right, that's kind of also like my point, to be honest with you. Cultures are indeed fluid. They aren't static, right? And the cultural borders go far further than ethnic borders or national borders. We were all using phones, wearing jeans, we're speaking English, but still we are Armenians, and that's my point. Even though we had this Christian innovation or transition, we did remain Armenians, and we had the same thing during Urartu. We were Armenians, and the same thing during the Artaxerxes dynasty, the Arsacids. So ethnically, we have remained the same people, but we had several cultural shifts. Yeah. So I would agree with that.
Well, I can chime in as well, and the negativity that is being perceived as such, it is really not negativity. It's about factual veracity of things that we discuss. During the early Christian era, and then with all the Crusades, even before the Crusades, the barbarians at that time were the Christians themselves, destroying and through blood and sword. That's how Christianity was distributed, including in North America and South America. in every other place. We have to accept that. Even the Islam learned a lot of the atrocious things that they do now from the Christians themselves. So we have to take that into consideration. And I would urge everybody to read, The Dark Side of Christian History, by Ellen Ellerby. But the point is that what we're trying to do is for us to really accept the idea that Christianity was part of the Armenian identity, and Armenians were able to distinguish themselves from others, through their separate approach to Christianity, with their separate approach to its manuscripts and the everything that followed with it. Whether we pay attention or not to the prayers and liturgy, even though they are all guided toward Israel and Jerusalem. But at the same time, because they are Armenian, as far as the way we pronounce things, and because it's written that way, we kind of have this alternate reality of what the status quo is. Whether we accept Christianity as something that kept us intact, which I agree with, that doesn't change the fact that there has been the creation of an alternate history, alternate reality, and we can't just accept Christianity as this lollipop that we like, right? We need to take it the way it is and what has transpired. And when we see Christianity today and its passive stance on things and the good things that it does, it wasn't the same way back then. It was primarily through destruction and chaos and everything else, witches being burned and so forth, people being killed, for it to eventually be embedded in the generation, for them to accept it to be the status quo. So I just want to paint the picture on both sides, so that way we can really see this as an even playing field, versus just praising something that actually had a history of killing things. So thank you.
Awesome. Next we have Shinobi Warrior, if you'd like to ask your question.
Hello. So just to start off, my name is not real. It's just a joke. But
Shinobi Warrior, man, we're already getting scared right there.
Yeah. So I just want to add on to some things about the history of Christianity amongst the Armenian nation. So there's a lot of kind of good arguments to make for both sides, but Armenians also need to realize that there are not just Christian Armenians. There are even Muslim Armenians or Zoroastrian Armenians who became extinct during the 1915 genocide. But we can't really just say that, if Armenia wasn't Christian, then Armenians wouldn't exist today, they would have been assimilated. Because, Persians, for example, they're an ancient civilization, right? And they adopted Islam, an Abrahamic religion, but although it did, take a lot of things away from their culture, Christianity also took a lot of things away from our culture, like the weekdays. We say Shabbat, Gidaki, Shafti, etc. Those are not Armenian. Those are it's from Hebrew. And the original names for the weekdays, I don't remember exactly, but it was Jiri, or it was pagan names. But yeah, Armenians would have existed even if there was no Christianity. I think that's pretty solid thing to say. And what else? Sorry. I don't usually talk about history that much. I just read about it. But even Armenia's conversion to Christianity, we have to look at who converted Armenia to Christianity. As we all know, it was Gregory the Illuminator. He himself was not even Armenian. He was Parthian. And he came from a family who would kill Armenian kings, like Anak the Parthian. He killed an Armenian king. And so, him and his family, they were They were put into jail or thrown into Khorvirab. But there were even, acts committed, Armenians they were also assimilated into other cultures because of Christianity. Like, a lot of Armenians were forced into the Orthodox Byzantine Church, and you can even read about the higher rooms. They're Armenian-speaking Greek Orthodox Church members, and the Greek Orthodox Church claims them as non-Armenian, as Greeks because of the church. And there have been a lot of cases where Armenians became Greeks, like Pontic Greeks. They themselves have a lot of mixture from not just Armenians, but Lazars, Georgians, and other ethnic groups who were kind of Christianized into the Orthodox Church. But yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of arguments to make, and you can even make the argument that Armenians were in modern day Israel, Palestine region before Christianity. And Armenians, they also expanded prior to Christianity as well. When you read about the Celtic Chronicles or a bunch of other stuff, it kind of states that. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
And you make valid points, and I think that whatever you covered in the last 2 minutes can have two different dissertations written. But it has a lot of details in there. So, Yeghishe, you want me to just put a commentary on there, and then you can follow?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. A couple of clarifying things. Again, and I agree as far as that is concerned. That was my point. Is that we have come across many civilizations, but we were able to remain intact as people. As far as for the word Shapat Giraki, Shapat, it comes from the Sumerian, and Sumerian is an Armenian dialect, and Shapat means chapel, Chapat, which means a portion of the week. So that's how the Semitic language is incorporated. Because remember, I said that many of the during the Babylonian captivity, many of the Jews stayed near Babylon, so they learned a lot of Armenian cultural aspects of things, and Shapat and all those words are really not Semitic or even Jewish or Hebrew. They are ancient Sumerian Armenian words. And then as far as for Gregory the Illuminator, I don't know why they call him Illuminator. We know that there was a lot of destruction that took place. And I'm glad that we're not using this platform as form of theology. But we need to acknowledge, the destruction that took place. Gregory the Parthian, I would understand, but Illuminator becomes very problematic. But I understand the suffix of it all, that he was the key in establishing the national religion of Armenia. And also even the word conversion, we have to use it very, very carefully. It was not conversion. It was more of a destructive transition, and you can't just convert people and they would agree with you right away. There had to be some resistance, and in my opinion, there was a huge resistance. But as far as for Armenians having different faiths, that shows the veracity of the Armenian people, and even Zarathustra was a Mithraistic priest from near Lake Urmia, who went along and then created the Zoroastrian religion. That's the reason why after that took place, they removed all the women goddesses, from the Zoroastrian faith, because it was male dominated around that era. And I'm sure on this aspect of that of Zarathustra, a great historian, Georg Kazarian would highly agree. So I want to give you that commentary of what you said, Yeghishe.
Yeah, thanks, guys. If I'm not mistaken, Zarathustra, at least according to one etymology, means lover of camels or manager of camels. I thought that would be funny. Yeah, it is. According to the Persians themselves. But as for what was said here or asked, the main point was Armenians would be fine without Christian conversion, and personally I have to disagree with that one, because actually the example that was brought up, that the Persians, look at the Persians, right? That actually proves my point. the Persians converted too. They are not pagans. They converted to an Abrahamic religion. And because of that, they might call themselves Iranians, but they don't have a script. So, so the entire region was converting from polytheism to monotheism, and I know Mithraism technically considered also a monotheism, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was the first monotheism. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff in Urartian theology too in that regard. But to come to that point, so the Persians actually lost their alphabet, they lost their religion, they actually only by the name and the language remained. But everyone in the region converted to Abrahamic religion. Where are the pagans of the region now? Where are these great pagans? I don't see them. So if, in fact, Armenians, by converting to Christianity, not only retained their ethnic designation, but actually even they even retained their alphabet and with music, and they all kinds of there was a national awakening, and this applies to every Christian actually in the region. They managed to, even in the Ottoman Empire, right? So the Christians, like the Assyrians and the Greeks, they retained their identity, but those who were Muslims unfortunately got assimilated into the Turkish identity, which is a foreign identity that came from Central Asia, and it has probably nothing to do with modern Turks. So most of them have just been assimilated. And a very good point that I always make in this regard is, like I said, the Hamshinti example, that these are my people, you can view them as a small experiment. Half of us is Muslim and half of us is Christian. And those who are Christians, like myself, we're from Abkhazia and the south of Russia, we would be dumbfounded if someone said that we aren't Armenians. We never even consider ourselves anything else than Armenian. But those who unfortunately left the church, they have a lot of trouble considering themselves Armenian. They have assimilated. So that's an effect of converting to anything other than Christianity. And
also to add, Yeghishe, on that, the Armenian church itself is the biggest promoter of Armenians not being Armenians if they're not Christian, and that has been very problematic. And
I agree with that.
Yeah, and that's kind of a very divisive, and that's my point, is that I'm just pointing out some of the negative things that we see within our culture and the church, not primarily everything altogether.
Yeah, and there were, like I said, there were a lot of wrong things happened too from our church, because indeed, like the person Naruto said before us, is because Armenian church, some of them converted to other forms of Christianity, were kicked out of the Armenian church. They actually also lost their identity. They became part of the Byzantines first, and then the Muslims, and now they call themselves Turks. So our church is indeed an institution that is more than just religious. And Yemen, they made mistakes. I do agree with that too.
Okay. Thank you.
Vahan, I know we're a little over time, but there's a couple more questions. Is it okay if I bring it up, or should I wrap it up?
Well, if Yeghishe is fine with it, sure. Let's have one more, huh?
Yeah, I'm fine, yeah.
Okay. Lucia, you have the stage.
Hi, thank you for today's talk. The question is to Vahan. If you could please tell us how long have you been doing your research? What interested you in the history of Armenian culture? And if you worked, I know you've done a lot of other researches like the origin of Basque language, and if you worked with other scholars, I would like to know that. We would like to know that. Also, there have been. I've read a couple of papers that regarding monotheism pre-pagan times, if you know anything about that within Armenians. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's a whole lot. Being that's it, but appreciate the questions. I'll be very brief. Obviously, I want to respect everybody's time, and my approach has been indirectly coming into the ancient Armenian history. I was more in tune in trying to find altruism and its concept within ancient civilizations. As I was trying to work on my doctorate, and then the more I went back in time, the more I saw Armenian fingerprints, spread all across the world. Obviously in Shumer, and then the Easter Islands and Basque and all that. So it was very intriguing. Obviously, I did have many mentors, even friend mentors. Gabriel Kazarian, the historian, is a very old friend of mine who I knew him since I was 12, 13 years old. And, he was an inspiration for me. And of course, throughout the years, at least from 2011, I would say has been the thrust between that time and now, for me to really going deep into to not only our history. I mean, examining ancient Armenian history is really examining world history, just because it's intertwined throughout thousands of years. Obviously, we contributed to human civilization's history, and in reverse, human civilization has contributed to ours. So it is interconnected. And also, back in 2014, when I published Language as a Fingerprint, I made sure that I write down all the people that I wanted to thank, for their own contributions and for them to be an inspirational people for me. And of course, if you have any of my publications, I have a huge glossary and an appendix, and as well as a bibliography section, because I really wanted to show to people that these are the scholars that I have been not only directly contacting with, but also the information I've been gathering that may not be accessible to others. So I always urge people to read my bibliography first and then go read my book, so otherwise it will be easier for them to comprehend that. And also I had direct communication, including Kim Beltman, that recently passed away from COVID. I had a huge discussion with him on our alphabet and so forth, and he was the one that really emphasized that our Armenian alphabet is more than 17,000 years old, which obviously predates the Portasar complex. But in other words, I was very excited to utilize my university research tools and methods for me to find these old articles that have been published in 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries that would talk about the ancient Armenian language and history and kind of how it faded away, starting with Abdul Hamid massacres and into the Armenian genocide era. So I was kind of glad to be part of the diaspora for me to uncover all this. And I'm one of the few, I would say, or we are one of the few on this call that we are trying to do this from abroad, outside of Armenia, and there are very few of us. And that was the other thing. I saw a lot of falsification coming from, Turkey and Azerbaijan, and also, many British scholars who have been bought by the Turkish and Azerbaijani government for them to write these falsehoods about Armenian history and so forth. So I thought that it's part of my journey and path and conviction for me to help, at least for us not to be erased, from historical books. So thank you.
Awesome. Next up, I'd like to bring Hasmik up to the stage. We have 2 more questions, and then I have to wrap it up. Hasmik?
Hello. Sorry, it's my first time using the app, so I don't know if can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So, pertaining to this topic, I believe that a lot of insights can be discovered through reading up about the Paulicians or the Paulicians. You have to be careful where to read about it. I don't really have a question per se. I have a suggestion I can give for furthering the discussion of this topic. There's a book of heresies. Now, you have to be careful when you read about these group of people, because there's a lot of propaganda written against them because they were against the main church, the Catholics, and what we came to call it the Orthodox versus the heterodox churches. So in the book of heresies, they say the Paulicians were said to worship the Son as Christ. And in the Yeghishe Akrites, the hero swore by the sweet Lord's Son and his sweet mother. So the sweet Lord's Son, Horus Arev, as we say today in our jargon, and his sweet mother. So we were known to be mother worshippers, worshippers of the divine feminine in that time. And as Vahan says, Anahit comes from an Armenian etymology. And in fact, Robert Ellis expands on that. He says, Anhatai, I mean, you don't pronounce the AY at the end, but I say that to emphasize this point, means pure, without division. It says Anhadakan.
Yeah.
And there's also lots of misconceptions and deliberate falsification of history when they say that all Armenians immediately became Christian. In medieval Islamic and Arabic manuscripts, they talk about the Orthodox, the Gregorian Christians, the ones that we believe converted in 301. Then they talk about the Paulicians. Then they talk about the Shamshia al-Armeni, for the Armenian sun worshippers at the time, still the Arevortik. And then they also talk about the Muslim Armenians. So the Paulicians, which they believe came from the word Bohosik or Bohosak, were known in Michael the Syrian's work as the Bene Bogusak. And it says that all that were known as the Bene Bogusak, the sons of Bohos, had all become Muslims since then. So I just want to, again, just drop this information and then back away, as both of you are researchers, to see where you can find, where you can see this information leading you to in the future for further discussion. That's all I got to say.
Yeghishe, you want to put a commentary on there?
Yeah, I can go very quick. Thanks for the information. The Paulicians are very interesting indeed. But we have to understand they are a mystical Christian sect that emerged during the Byzantine era, and they were indeed Armenians. So it's very cool. And they are on my list of research. I haven't done too much research into them, but I'm very interested. Like I said, personally, I'm intrigued with everything about the Armenian history, everything we did, even the Ottoman history. We sometimes want to forget that, but we had a lot of great Armenians doing awesome things there. In my opinion, we owe it to our heritage to recover it. Paulicians, very interesting. They are mystic Christians, and they have this Gnostic. I believe actually they're one of the first mystic Christians. It might be even the first. Later, the Bogomols and the Gnostics actually trace root to them. So they had this very interesting mystical type of Christian religion that they kind of weave together. So it's too bad, but the what I know about them, the Byzantines slaughtered them, most of them. So I don't know if they became Muslims or not, but as far as I know, Byzantines slaughtered them. There were some letters that were recovered, and there is a book written. I haven't read it, so that's certainly on my list. So thanks for mentioning that. It's very interesting to explore, certainly. Yeah.
Just a couple of things on that. The Paulicians themselves actually were the ones that were chased by the Armenian Church out of Armenia, and that's why they went to the German area and the barbarians. That's how the idea kind of sprung from. They were that's the reason why you see so many Armenian terminology in Europe. because of the Paulicians and the Bavarians and so forth when they moved there, because Armenian church chased them out, and the reason why they chased them out because the Paulicians and many things that came before Christianity, everybody knew that the idea of the sun was actually had to do with the sun itself, not a human being, and that's where the problem started when they decided to convert the actual sun into sun, the human being, and that's where it became into conflict, that they wanted to historicize something that was meant to just be interpreted, indirectly and not literally. And that's where the chaos started, is once you started to present the celestial sun and the metaphor of it into an actual history. And that's why the Paulicians were considered to be mystics, because they actually had a connection to Mithraism as well. That's why I was emphasizing that Christianity is a tangent, you might say, with an influence of Mithraism, with a heavy influence from Judaism itself. So it's like a mixed salad, acap sandal, we say it in Turkish. It has turned into this muddied water, and people can't really distinguish one from the other, and I think Armenians were trying to filter that out and find their own identity within Christianity. And some took it literally, some did not, but they always thought of the essence of the idea of Christianity to be poor, very pure as far as a representation of celestial. That's why I always call it astrotheology, because our ancients kind of saw things from an astrotheological standpoint, and instead of just anthropomorphizing, people out of thin air. So,
thank you. Last question, George. You have a stage. Oh, and then I have one more Geb afterwards, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hi, thank you. I just like the hypotheticals.
You're breaking up.
What would it be like if Armenians didn't become Christian? Sorry if you can hear me. I just asked, what would it be like if Armenians didn't become Christian? What do you think? How would history play out?
Oh, I think we covered that to a certain extent. But Yeghishe, you want to just cover this?
Yeah, I think we have answered that, George, already. Maybe very quickly. It's a difficult question, right? What could have, should have. In my opinion, the entire region was becoming from polytheistic to monotheistic. Everyone adopted some form of Abrahamic religion, and there was a lot of prosecution back and forth. And so my stance is, if I had to guess, and it is a guess, then I would say we would be in big trouble. We would have Rome and the Muslim world against us. And if we would have converted to Islam, I'm fairly sure we would have been Turkish now.
Awesome. Last question, Go ahead.
Hello, thank you for hosting this room. Thank you for the guest speakers for actually engaging in this conversation. After all, it all of these different aspects and ideas are very crucial to our history and to our identity that's been shaped today. I'm sorry if it's loud in the background, but my question is to both of you, and I know that Setyan, Mr. Setyan, I do see that you do put an emphasis on this on social media outlets and stuff. Since everything is set in stone, after all, we are Armenian, and we need to focus on our enemies, not internally but externally. And I know that our enemies have been trying to erase our history and everything, destroying it, changing our Armenian, old Armenian places like Bortasad, saying that it's part of ancient Turkey, when Turkey is nowhere near being ancient. What are ways, ideas, any ways for us to counter these attacks on our culture and our history? Thank you.
Well, as you can see, the what even people of R is doing is creating these very good articles that are very comprehensible and easily distributed across the media. What we are lacking and deficiently so is the number and the sheer power at the moment for us to able to counteract these falsifications. You're basically this is the actual scenario. There is about 10 of us that really are at the forefront in battling this battle on falsification, and we're fighting against governments that have billions of dollars to spare. Okay, this is how bad the situation is. So if the Armenian government itself is not doing anything on the cultural preservation of things at an international scale, that actually creates the opportunity out of chaos for us to create this international anti-defamation league that has to do with the preventing any falsifications, and funds need to be allocated for this particular purpose. Because otherwise we are going to lose this war as well, because we don't have enough media outlets and the platforms necessary for us to even impose fines on the falsification of our history and language. That's the reason why we're trying to do this at a vocal level, where we are very open. Especially I can speak for myself. I don't know anybody else who has really been in faces of all these falsifiers all the time, making sure that they know at least that they're falsifying history. Few people have done it, but we got to do it more often, and we need the funding for it. That's the problem. And for the world civilization, the value, at least the attempt for us to save the Armenian history from falsification, is the least of their worries. Even though the Armenian history actually ties in with their history, throughout the millennia, and that's the thing. The sense of urgency is not there. We do have individuals who do care, who ache about it, but there is no a group that has been put together intentionally at an international level for us to save this. And I think that people of our website and the Armenian Highland website and so forth, those are key, but we need more professors and academicians for them to be at the forefront of this debate. And that's why I think that we should do more debates with falsification or falsifiers of Armenian history at a university level. We also need to make sure that these universities in the United States do not promote anti-Armenian or falsification of Armenian history. I know they're doing that a lot. Richard Hovanesyan is one of them, Nina Garzoyan and Peter Cowie, and all the other buffoons have been doing this for such a long time. And I think the time has come that we are now aware of all the shenanigans that's happening, and we really need to come together on this one. So the idea of Christianity and so forth, it's okay to talk about it, but I think that we have a more common problem, and I think that commonality is where we come together with Armenians and non-Armenians to really protect something very valuable. So that's what I got to say.
Thank you. I just got a message. Just want to sneak in this comment. This person says, whatever we may personally feel about the church, without the churches being built in the diaspora, we would have been lost. The church was a symbol of community and gathering and to prevent complete assimilation. It wasn't just a religious symbol. Where churches were built, Armenian communities were built around it. That's why I fully disagree that Christianity destroyed the Armenian culture. In fact, it did the opposite.
Divan, may I add a little bit to the formal thing that was said? In my opinion, we need academics, of course, to be interested in this. History is a very difficult subject. It's very difficult. It has a lot of layers. I think Napoleon once said, history is a set of lies agreed upon, or something like that. And it is true, there is some, it's very easy, it's very politicized. But there are some fields, interesting fields like genetics that you can't actually falsify. Well, you can, but you have to do much more work there. And there is a lot of interesting innovation there that we need to pay attention to. But in my opinion, I wanted to add, I think, what could we do? We need artists too to participate, guys. We have a lot of artists. Armenians are talented people. We have people who make music, who can draw and make cartoons and whatever, a series. And if we had this type of media used by artists for telling stories, telling Armenian stories from our history, whatever time period, I think that would be awesome. I think that would speak to a lot of, that would speak to a wide audience of people. It would inspire people it would inspire new people to come into the field and study history, study anthropology or genetics, and to contribute to this field. I think we're just scratching the surface when it comes to Armenian history. And artists are the key. Something that some people now might not think about it, but yeah, they are the key art is part of culture. We're talking about culture here. Well, culture is not something that stops; it continues. So whatever we do now, if we continue certain traditions, certain things that we have been doing, and we can actually revive culture, we can give it a new renaissance, So I would say artists are also very important in these discussions, not just historians and academics. Guys, if you watch documentaries or some cool series on Netflix, those things speak to our imagination. So I would say I would really love to see some of those kind of things like series or documentary movies on Armenian history or something like that. Yeah.
Awesome, gentlemen. Thank you for the discussion. Before I move over to Vic, I'd like to say tap on the greenhouse at the top and join the club if you'd like to hear more discussions. Also tap on Vic's image and follow Med Herosner. This discussion is recorded and will be on YouTube at a later time. Also, if you like Vahan's discussion, his books are at Abre Bookstore and Amazon. If you like Yeghishe's discussion, you could follow him on peopleofr.com, Facebook, and Instagram. Vic, you have the stage.
Thank you, Didon. Thanks everyone for doing this. This was really great, great conversation. I want to thank both Dr. Vahan Setyan and Yeghishe Kazarian for doing this and coming together. I personally, both Mike and I think we should be doing this a lot more. And just to mention, if you missed this part, if you joined late, this is being recorded for our podcast, which is Med Herosner. Again, like Didon said, you can hit on the picture and follow us. It will be available on all major platforms tomorrow, and then we'll have it on YouTube as well, most likely Monday. Couple of things. If you like the show, we're going to do a lot of this. Just to mention, next week, Thursday, 8 p.m. Pacific Coast Standard Time, it'll be our first YouTube live, which will be with historian Kazarian, and the subject will be history of Cilicia, which is Kilikia. Besides that, thank you again. This was amazing. Thank you to our guests. Didon, thank you for moderating. That was really great. And till the next episode. Thank you guys. Take care.